All right, hey everybody. I'm going to teach you how to play Behold Rome. This is a civilization building card game that you play without a table. It's 18 cards at its core. It's a solo game. It takes, well, it depends who you are. It takes me upwards of an hour, but if I feel like fast players could play this in a half hour. So what you're going to do in Behold Rome is you're going to play a number of rounds depending on your difficulty setting. The default setting is 12 rounds, so you're going to go through the deck 12 times. You're going to be upgrading cards, storing and spending resources. You're going to be conquering and abandoning regions, and you're going to be upgrading or developing your nation. So there's a lot going on in this little game, and I will try to get through the rules as efficiently as possible, but I also don't want to leave anything out so that you can, if this is the only resource that you have, or if you want to learn from the video, I want you to be able to learn from the video. So we'll go over components quick. 16 Civ cards. These are the cards that have the 4 orientations and are one of the 5 suits. I will go over those later. Then you have your nation card. Then you have the round card. This tracks which round you're on. And if you have just the standard game, those are your 18 cards. If you have the, I think I'm going to call it the deluxe version, you also have a card to track which age you're in. This just makes it easier to track, to remember which round you're in. So without this age card, you just have to remember if you're in the front, middle, or back third of the game. Not too hard if you're just playing a game all the way through. Then you're also going to get, in the standard game, I think it's going to come in a hook box and you're going to get some enemy civs to play against or some rival civs. In the deluxe version, it's going to come in a tuck box, so you're going to get a card with the 4 rival civs. And then the other thing that comes with the deluxe version is these game save cards. There's 4 cards that will track where your stored resources are, so that if you come back to the game, you can remember which cards were stored. And then there's these 2 cards that will allow you to track what cards were in your hand and if you had any conquered regions at the time, and so you can pick up the game later. All right, what you're going to do for setup, orient all of the Civ cards to the level that has the star. So each card has 4 levels numbered over here. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now the levels might have different names. They might even be different card types or card colors, and that's okay. We're just paying attention to the level numbers for now, and you're going to want to orient all the cards to the orientation that has the star. Now most of them, that's going to be level 1. I think there's a couple cards that actually start out at level 4, so just pay attention to the star for setup, and that includes your nation card. And so you're going to start out as a monarchy, and as you develop, if you develop, you'll move to a republic, and then an empire, and a theocracy. So a couple of important concepts right away that I think I'll go through right now. There are 2 concepts regarding the state of your nation. You can there are 4 nation statuses, and I just mentioned those, and those correspond to the different images you see here in the banner. So there's monarchy, republic, empire, and theocracy. Those are the 4 nation statuses. Now there are 2 nation conditions. You can see that 2 of these statuses have red banners and 2 of them have blue banners. So there's ancient red or advanced blue, and that's just going to be important because some of these Civ cards, you're not going to be able to play them or conquer them if you are not in the correct nation status or nation condition. So I will go over that as we get to that piece. So let's finish setup. We oriented all our cards to the starting orientation based on the star, and we're going to give them a nice shuffle, making sure that we didn't ruin the orientation here. Put your nation card to the back, remembering that the star is where it starts. And then if you're playing with just the standard version, orient this to, either way, orient it so that the number 1 is here so you can track your round. If you are playing with the deluxe version, go ahead and put that age to age 1 so you can remember that you are in age 1. These other cards, these game save cards, you don't need until you want to put the game down and pick it up again. And you don't actually need this enemy civ card in your hand. I will go over these later, but if you want to play against a rival civ, all you have to do at this point is choose which civ you're going to play against, and at the end you'll consult their card section here in order to find out if you beat their score. So you are going to be getting a final score. You can play in 2 modes. You can play in Score Chaser mode, which is just play through the deck 12 times, play 12 rounds, and tally up your score and see how well you can do. I think a fun little exercise is try out finishing on each of the different nation statuses and see how high you can score with each nation status. But the default way to play is actually to choose a rival civ, and you'll tally up their score at the end. They will score a number of base points and then some variable points based on what is actually in your deck at the end game state. So we're set up, and your hand size is 5. What you're going to do for starting the game is draw your hand of 5. Now, in terms of holding the game, you're going to be doing a couple of things that require you to use both your right and your left hands here. So the deck is considered in your left hand, so when things reference the deck, that's what it is. It's the main part of the game. Your hand is technically in your right hand, although you can see I'm supporting it with, I'm just giving you tips and tricks here. You can see I'm supporting it with even my right thumb. I can take my right hand off and just hold it between my thumb and fingers. Or even just the deck itself can be used as a prop to help hold your hand. But you can see using my fingers and with just the deck hanging out in my left hand, I'm able to fan through my cards. I can consolidate those cards and kind of put them right here in order to do things like, say, discard that card and then just go ahead and grab my hand back up. So what you're going to be doing is taking turns until... let me put this another way. You're going to take actions by playing cards. So you play a card for its action. A card's action is just this text in the middle here. So whatever is in this open area here with the text, that's the card's action, and that's what you get when you play the card. There's going to be costs almost always associated with playing a card for its action, but I will go through that. And so you're going to play as many cards as you can or want to for their action. You're going to resolve those actions, and then at some point you're going to be out of cards, or you're going to either going to have to end the turn, or you're going to elect, you're going to volunteer to end the turn. And what happens when you end the turn is you have to choose. You either discard a card from your hand, and discarding means putting it to the back of the game. So let's just say I want to end the turn right away. So I'm going to discard this card. I'm going to choose that card. And then after you end the turn, you actually get to draw up to your hand size of 5. So here I have 4 cards in hand. I would just draw up from the top of the deck to fill my hand to 5. And notice you're always going to see this top card of the deck. It's not in your hand, but it can be a little bit handy to pay attention to what's coming, since you get the opportunity to see what's coming. So let's do another example. Let's say I've played a couple of cards, and I'll just skip ahead to a different game state. I only have these 3 cards in hand, and let's say I want to end the turn. I'm going to discard a card from my hand, let's say, to end the turn. Okay, now I have 2 cards left in my hand, so I get to draw up to my hand size of 5. Instead of discarding a card from your hand, you can actually choose to discard the top card of the deck instead. So let's repeat that game state, or let's create a new one here. Let's say that this is my game state. Here's the deck, and here's my hand of 2 cards. I want to end the turn, but let's say, well, I kind of want to carry both of these cards over. That's fine. I can choose to discard the top card of the deck instead, and then I'll go ahead and fill my hand up to 5. Okay, so those are turns. You're going to keep taking turns. We'll go through a round real quick. And through the course of taking turns, you're going to end up discarding cards. You are going to run into your nation card. So what happens when you run into your nation card? Let's say, I don't know. Let's say this is the game state. And, okay, I want to go ahead and end my turn, so I'm going to discard this card. And now I can't draw any more cards because I've run into my nation card. So no matter what you were doing, no matter what effect was causing you to draw cards, when you run into your nation card, you have to stop, and any other cards you would have drawn are wasted. However, if there were other things that that action was going to allow you to do, you can go ahead and carry those out. That's going to be rare. Most of the time, you're going to end the turn, draw out cards, and you're going to end up running into your nation card that way. So what happens when you get to the end of the round? So we have triggered round end. However, you don't have to move on right away. I could play this card, for example, and let's say it told me to discard a card, and I play the card, and I get to store it or something. Once you have revealed your nation card, you can choose when to move on, and if you have no cards left, you have to move on. So if you have no cards remaining because you've taken actions, and they're either stored or conquered or discarded, then you get to move on for free. So you would just discard your nation card. So that's putting it to the back. You're going to accelerate your round card. So we're going from round 1 to round 2. If you have an age card, you will orient this properly. We're still in age 1, so we'll just put that to the back. And then you get to draw up to finish your hand. So you notice I got to actually carry 2 cards over from that round. Okay, otherwise, you can actually elect to end the round and move on by discarding a card. So you don't have to have played all of your cards in your remaining hand. You can choose to end the round, but you could take 3 or 4 actions potentially with the cards remaining in your hand after you have triggered round end. Importantly, during round end, so while your nation card is revealed, you have the opportunity once per round to develop your nation. And don't get confused, because developing your nation is very specific. You have to pay the cost written on the nation card level that you're on, and that will upgrade you to the next nation level. So here we would have to abandon 1 controlled region and pay 1 materials, and then we would get to go ahead and develop our nation. Now that's a slightly different definition from developing civ cards, but I will get to that in a minute here. So why don't we do that? So you understand the turn structure, you understand the round structure. At the end of round 12, the game just ends and you tally up your score. So let's get to like the meat of the game here and talk about actions. Maybe it would be helpful for me to go through what the general flow of the game is going to look like. So these cards have various effects, and you just, at its core, it's a simple game, but it's also a little bit hard to probably wrap your head around right away. But at its core, it's a simple game. You play the card, you resolve the action, you just do what it says, and then you keep taking actions till you end the turn, and you go through that cycle over and over. Two common, I guess, game flows that you're going to run into. You're going to play cards to store resources, and then you're going to spend those resources to do stuff. That's actually most of the game. So resources are these icons on the top left. There's 2 types of resources. There are materials. Those are the gray bricks there. And there's population. That's the brown little fella icon there. When you play an action that allows you to store resources, that means putting it to the back of the game. So as if you discarded it, but you rotate it to the right 90 degrees, and now I have that as a stored resource. Now, as you can see, as I discard more cards and I move through the deck, that resource is actually moving forward in the deck. So there's a little bit of a timer. Those resources can expire. If you get to, if that resource would get to, let's just put one on my side of the round here. If that resource gets to the front of the game, or if you ever draw the card in front of that stored resource. So let's say that happened, that resource becomes a top card of the deck. You could potentially, if you keep drawing, that could potentially come into your hand. You always have the option though, and this is important, you always have the option to stop drawing cards. Let's say I ended the turn, I'm trying to draw my hand up to 5, but I don't want to draw this card because that would cause this population to go away. You can always choose to stop drawing cards at a card that's in front of a stored resource. All right, so you're going to be storing resources with card actions. If you have to pay or spend a resource, and the card will instruct you to do so, that just means taking it from the stored area over here. And I guess I grab both of those. That likely wouldn't happen. Usually it's one or the other. So let's just say I'm going to pay 1 material. I would just discard that to the back of the game. Now I have paid 1 material and I can do whatever the card said I got to do. Okay, so going back to like the game flow, there's these 2 different currencies, right? The resources are materials and population. Typically, you're going to be spending materials to develop cards. That just means taking cards up levels. So Julius Caesar here is level 1. If I were to develop 1, I could rotate him to level 2, and now he's Augustus. Usually, there's exceptions, but usually that's what materials are spent for, is for develop actions. Population, on the other hand, is typically spent for conquer actions. Now, there's a special card type that I haven't gotten to, and I should go through the card types for you, but the blue ones are important because these are regions, and you can tell already that they're different because they don't have some number of resources in the top left corner, which virtually all cards do. I think there's maybe one exception. Instead, they have this number and a little silhouette of what the region looks like. So this is a little silhouette of North Africa over here. That number is the region's wealth. And you're going to be spending population in order to conquer regions. I'll get to the specific actions, but I just wanted to talk through the game flow. Usually population is spent to conquer regions. When you conquer a region, it goes to the very back of the game and it sticks out above the deck. Now, you can conquer up to 4 regions you can control up to 4 regions at a time. And so let's say I controlled 2 regions, they would look like that. So they kind of stack up vertically. When you discard cards, they don't go behind these stored regions. Controlled, they're not stored, sorry, they're controlled. That's the language the game uses. So controlled regions always stay in the very back of the game. So when I discard cards, I'm just going to discard them in front of those controlled regions, but behind all the other cards. That seems like it would be challenging to do. It's really not. You just kind of slide it right in front and it goes pretty well. Okay, why don't we do... I'm going to take half a step back and we're going to go over a little bit of card anatomy, and then we're going to go through some card actions. Okay, so we talked through the level process, or the levels, and sometimes cards will reference levels. Up on the top left is typically resources, unless it's a region, then it's the region's wealth. Resources, cards in my hand. Let me put it this way. The icons on resources in cards in my hand, the resource icons in cards in my hand are considered available resources. So if the game or the instruction manual talks about available resources, those are just the icons that are available on cards in your hand. Now, available does not mean it's ready for you to spend them. You don't own these yet. You only own them once they're stored. So stored resources are the ones 90 degrees off to the right here. You can store up to 4 cards at once. Now that's not a resource limit, that's just a card limit. So here I'm maxed out on cards. I only have 4 slots for these cards. But as you level up cards, you will notice that a lot of times there's multiple resources on a single card. Sometimes there's up to 3 on a single card. So you might have like a ton of resources even on just a couple of cards, but you're maxed out on, you have 4 card slots going this way, and you have 4 card slots going vertically. So stored resources go over here. Conquered, or when you conquer a region, it goes here. Once it's over here vertically, it's considered a controlled region. Okay, there are a handful, I think there's 5 card types, and these are easier to see based on the color, but I also didn't want to rely on color alone, so there's also this icon in the top center that indicates what card type it is. They're actually somewhat thematic. It's not important that you know the names of these card types, but it's kind of fun. So the gray cards are institutions. These are typically leader positions, or maybe like common, like public religion, or some other things. You'll get to know them as you play it, but so gray is institutions. Blue is regions. Purple are tributaries. These are usually at the higher levels of cards that had regions on them, and this sort of represents, okay, you don't really occupy that region anymore, but you have them as a client state and you can derive the benefits from that. Red cards are action cards. Action cards are they're sort of a catch-all category, but a lot of times they are your cards that allow you to like conquer or do other stuff. So this Roman expansion card is an action card. It actually is flexible. It allows you to store either materials or population, although it's less efficient than the more specialized cards. Case in point, your Roman legions are your most efficient way to conquer. And I will get to conquer, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Yellow cards are production cards. These are the cards that are specialized at getting you resources. And I'm seeing if there is a card type that I missed. I don't think so. A couple of your cards, this is one of them. So there's a couple of ways to build your engine. A couple of the cards in the game actually key off of your controlled region wealth. So you can actually total your region wealth, and that's your total controlled region wealth. Let me upgrade this one, or develop it so that it'll be a little bit different. So right now I have 3 2 + 1 total controlled region wealth, and you can see that this card keys off of your total controlled region wealth. Now there's another card, City of Rome. This is actually your best card at getting population. This card doesn't key off of total wealth. Instead, it keys off of the number of controlled territories, which would be 2. I control 2 territories. Okay, just a little bit more of card anatomy. There's this box on the top right, this rectangle. Inside of that live keying icons. They actually don't have any effects in and of themselves, but you'll notice that a lot of scoring effects, rely on these keying icons. So the presence of those in your deck at game end can be quite critical, and typically as you level up cards, you're going to see more of those keying icons or different types of keying icons. Like the Egyptians here. They have 2 of these plants and 2 of these ships, and so you might want those in your deck because it synergizes with a different card's scoring ability. So speaking of that, let's go over some scoring abilities. That is this yellow bar on the top right. So that black circle there says VP. I don't know if you can see it. And then what's written there, this gives you 4 victory points if you are a republic at game end. Or the Egyptian's tributary here gives you 3 victory points per production card at level 3 or higher. Let's go through a couple more. The Senate gives you 1 victory point per 2 prosperity. I will go over prosperity in a minute. Let's pick a couple others here. The Roman legions, at level 3, they give you 1 victory point per 3 sword icons. You can see the sword icons. They provide some of their own victory points. So these scoring rules are extremely varied. Some of them are just flat points, but most of them are conditional on some game state or another. Like another example is 1 victory point per 2 territory wealth. Now, it will specify if it wants you to key off of controlled territory wealth versus just wealth in your deck. So right now, you know, this is 1 territory wealth in my deck, and there's 2, 3, 4. So I don't have to control those. They still count as wealth in my deck. Okay, a couple other items. I alluded to this before. Some of these cards levels are going to have these. They are, what do I call them in the rulebook? They are not prerequisites. They are requirements. And what a requirement is it you, in order to play this card for its action, you actually need to be in an advanced nation state. So your nation needs to be either an empire or a theocracy, just one of the 2 blue nation statuses. So in order to play Trajan, you need to be a blue nation status advanced. However, you can do other stuff with this. It doesn't mean that you can't store this card as resources as a result of another card's effect. It doesn't mean you can't discard this card to pay the cost for another card's effect. All it means is you can't play this card for its action. Or, the only other rule there is, on regions, it also means that you can't conquer this region. So if you were, say, an empire, which is a blue nation status, you would not be able to conquer Gaul. And you also are, you know, you couldn't play the card for its effect. Some of these regions have actions that you can play in addition to just being able to be conquered. Okay, we're getting close. Let's just go through some actions. There's a lot of keywords in this game. So if you get the keywords down, you pretty much have yourself covered. But the process is, it's kind of a sequence. So you choose which card you're going to play. You pay its costs first before doing anything else. Then you resolve that card's action, the action that you just played. It does refer to the played card is what it's called. And then you discard the played card. And then the last thing that you ever do is, if it calls for you to store any resources, you actually do that last. And the reason that's actually beneficial to the player, because let's say I had to discard 2 cards to pay the cost, and then I had to, you know, discard or pay 1 material for the cost, and then I discard the played card, and that effect allowed me to store 1 resource. I wait until the very last to store that resource because it puts it further back in the deck, and so you get to hold on to that resource longer. If you had stored that resource first, you know, we ended up discarding like 4 cards there. It would be in front of those cards, and you would get that resource for a less amount of time. Okay. So a major thing you're going to be doing in the game is storing. So this card says, discard a card, store population equal to the number of controlled territories. That seems pretty self-explanatory. So we would discard any card from our hand of our choice, unless the card says otherwise. So let's say I'm going to discard that card. Okay. I've paid the cost. Now I get to resolve the effect. It says store population equal to the number of controlled territories. Remember that storing resources is the exception to the rule. You do that at the very end of the turn. So I'm going to go ahead and discard the played card. And then let's just say we had one controlled region. So that means I'm going to store one population. When you're storing materials, you have to take that from available, I'm sorry, I said materials. It's materials or population. When you're storing resources, you have to take it from your hand. So that's why the concept of available resources is important. Resources on cards in your hand are available to be stored. I didn't do this in my example, but in a real game I would have, and I'm telling you now, you can actually store the played cards. So this card lets you store a population. Instead of discarding the played card, I'm going to go ahead and store the played card. There, now I have that population for later. Okay, so that's storing. When an action tells you to pay a certain number of resources, that just means take it from stored and discard it. Let's go through the other two main actions that you're going to be doing are developing and conquering. So let me find one. Let me just go through the deck and find one. There. The Aqueducts says pay up to 3 materials, developing 1 for each. So you get to choose how many materials you pay. Even if you had more, you could only pay, you could choose to pay 1 or 2, or you could pay all 3. Developing just means taking a card up a level. So I'm going to pretend that we had that card stored and this was our hand. I'm going to play this card. So I decide I'm going to play this card. Pay up to 3 materials, developing 1 for each. So I'm going to pay the cost first. I have 2 materials to spend, so I'm going to spend them both. And then, just so I don't forget, I'm going to discard the played card, because you cannot develop the played card. So the played card you can't develop or degrade. So that it's basically out of play. So this effect lets me develop 1. So for each point of develop, I get to take a card up a level. So I'm looking through my hand. It has to be from a card in your hand. Interestingly, Sulla is already at level 4. Probably not worth it. I think I'm going to take Gaul up from level 2 to level 3, Gaul and Germania. And I might have different reasons for doing that. Sometimes it's because I like the action. Sometimes it's for these keying icons. And sometimes I just want wealthier territories to conquer. Okay, so that's developed. If I had played, let's find that card again. Right, in my example, I had discarded 2 materials. So I could have, let me go through that again. I had discarded 2 materials. I'm going to discard the played card. Now I get to develop 2. I took this one up 1 level, and I'm going to take this one up 1 level. But you could do it on the same card. So let's just say, sorry for bumping my camera so much. Let's say I had earned 2 develop from my action. I could take Africa up from level 1 to level 2, and then again from level 2 to level 3. So you can spread your develop across different cards, or you can consolidate it just to 1 card. Now degrade is another keyword you'll see, and actually Sulla is a good example. His action says degrade a card to store 1 population. So let's say, so degrade is the opposite of develop. It means just taking it down a level. So for every point of degrade, you have to take a card down 1 level. Typically, like, this is you have to pay all the costs. You can't forgo any of the costs. That's kind of the point of the costs to an action. So the condition to storing that 1 population, I have to pay the cost of degrading a card. So I'm going to, I would say I really want to do that. I'm going to take Africa down from level 3 to level 2. There's my degrade cost done, and I'm going to discard the played card. If you degrade a card or develop a card, it actually stays in your hand. You don't have to discard it. Okay, so develop and degrade are major actions that you will be taking. The other really important action is conquer actions. And so I'm going to find our legions. They are our best conquering card. And I'm going to pretend that we had one population stored, and this was our hand. So this is the game state. I have one population stored, and this is my hand. And I really want to conquer a region. Well, you can conquer regions that are in your hand, and right now we have Africa and Gaul. You need to pay attention to the region's wealth, because that's the amount of conquer you're going to need to conquer that region. So let's look at our action here. Up to 3 times, pay 1 population or degrade a card for conquer 1. So I could do a combination of paying population and degrading other cards. I'm going to, you know what? I could take Trajan down 1, so there's degrade 1. Take Trajan down, so that's level 3 to level 2. So that has generated me 1 conquer. And then I'm going to pay the rest of that cost by paying that population for another conquer. So I have generated conquer 2 with that 1 conquer action. So as a result of that conquer action, I got conquer 2, and I could actually conquer either of these. So I'm going to, let's say, choose Africa. And I will put that to the back. And now that's a controlled region. Then I'm going to discard the played card. And I can continue playing actions, or I could end my turn. Is there anything else with conquer actions that I want to tell you about? Just make sure that you remember you can't conquer a region unless you are the appropriate nation status. Now, many of the cards don't have a nation status requirement. Let me think about other things. Don't let me forget to talk about unrest and prosperity. I want to quickly talk about prerequisites. And so requirements are these banners here. And those could be a specific nation status too. There's a couple of cards in here that require you to be a monarchy, for example. Like Julius Caesar, you actually have to be a monarchy, not just an ancient nation to play Julius Caesar. But some of these cards have prerequisites. And there's not that many, because this actually requires you to remember something, and I didn't want you to have to remember too many things in the game. But you can see that the Carthaginians here, tributary, on the left side here, there's this bar, kind of hard to see on my camera, but it's a red bar and it says North Africans. All that means is you have to have the North Africans tributary active before you can upgrade or, develop to the Carthaginians. So the difference between a requirement, the banners here, and a prerequisite, the bar here, is a requirement means you can't play this card for its action or conquer this card if it was a region unless you are the appropriate nation status or condition. The prerequisites over here mean you can't even develop the card into this card level if you don't have the prerequisite card in play. So let's say we were on Hispania here. We could not develop this card if we didn't have the North Africans in play. Another example is there's a handful of cards. Actually, your nation card is a good example. You can't develop your nation from an empire to a theocracy unless you have the Constantine card active. Active just means you have that card level oriented upright. So right now the Carthaginians are active instead of Hispania or either of the other 2 card levels. Okay, now I've thrown a lot at you, but I want to reiterate, developing your nation card and developing any given civ card is actually a little bit different. To develop civ cards, you have to play a card and resolve an action that gives you a certain amount of development. So if you get developed 2, you could take 1 card up 2 levels, or you could take 2 cards up 1 level. Okay, that's for civ cards. For your nation, you can't play like some other card for a develop action to develop your nation status. You have to pay the specific cost noted by the card. And the cost on this card level tells me what it costs to move past this and actually develop up. So to go from a republic up to level 3, because we're on level 2 right now. We'd have to abandon a total of 3 territory wealth, and then we could upgrade to or develop ourselves to level 3, the Empire. Okay, I didn't tell you about abandoning. That's actually really easy. If you are instructed to abandon a region, that just means discard it. If you have multiple regions, put it in front of the other regions but behind the deck, and you can choose which one to abandon. Very rarely, there's one card in here that will actually allow you, it kind of breaks the rules, it allows you to develop a controlled region. Controlled regions are the ones back here. So if I played that card and I got to develop a controlled region, that means I could take this region up a level. So I could take it from level 2 to level 3 and slot it back, and I have it controlled. That's quite powerful, but you'll see the card is also quite costly and kind of hard to play for good reason. If you end up, you can actually, many of these region cards are not regions at every single level. You can see that at level 3 this is a region, at level 4 this is a tributary. If you develop a controlled region and it goes to a different card type, you can't have any other card type controlled back there. So you can do that, you're allowed to do that, but you have to discard it right away. Okay, one other important kind of, actually this is quite an important rule, to develop into a tributary level. So to take a card from a non-tributary level to a tributary level, the purple ones, you have to abandon a region first as part of the cost. So that's an unstated cost because there's, you still play a normal develop action. So let's say I have develop 1. Okay, I'm going to take this card up from level 3 to level 4. But in order to get it to a tributary, I have to abandon a region first. Tributaries tend to be quite powerful for scoring and for other things, but also your nation card might have you'll discover a good way to play Empire is getting tributaries out. Okay, I'm trying to think. I think we went through all the actions. If you're ever in doubt, just do what the card says. Some of these, break the rules a little bit, but that's to be expected. Let's go through scoring. So let's say I've gotten to the end of round 12. I've got my cards all messed up, but let's just say... Wow, where's my round card? There it is. Okay, let's say I turned it to round 12, put it to the back, and now I get to play through that round. And now I have hit my nation card, and actually this would end up being right behind it, just the way things would go. When I hit my nation card, and I have no more actions I can take, then you keep everything where it's at, except for resources. Resources that were stored, you can go ahead and just put those into the deck anywhere. The order of your deck does not matter at this point. So say it's game end, I'm just going to make it easier and more convenient to score, I'm going to go ahead and just put my stored resources back into the deck. What is important though is some of the cards key off of controlled regions. So either keep those in the back of the deck, set them on the table, or do something so that you can remember which regions you've controlled. One thing I like to do, and it works pretty well, is I will just put like the round card and the nation card and sandwich it around those controlled regions. That way when I'm fanning through the deck later, I can remember, oh yeah, the regions in between my round card and the nation card were my controlled regions. Okay, when you're scoring, just go through every single card. Most cards, not all cards, but most cards have a scoring rule. Just do what the scoring rule says. So if it's one of these rectangular card looking things, it just means the presence of that card in your civ. Like, notice that because we have this tributary out, we have foregone the ability to have this region out, right? So you will have a variable number of different card types in your deck at game end. This just says you score 2 victory points per region you have in your deck. We've gone through a few of these. One per bag icon in your deck. It doesn't have to be on controlled regions. Any card in your deck when it's talking about keying icons. This is one per blue banner in your deck. Gosh, I keep forgetting the name. Requirement blue. So cards with blue requirements, including itself. One per institution at level 3+. One per plant icon in your deck, and so on. So go through all of your cards and your nation card. So teaser, your nation card is going to have the most robust scoring condition of any card typically in your deck. And you can discover your own You can discover your own strategies with this. So the monarchy scores based on bag keying icons in your deck. Republic scores on the presence of prosperity. I will get to that. Empire, back to those crucial tributaries. 7 victory points per tributary. So they're hard to get out, remember, because you have to abandon a region. But you can see that it might just pay off for you if you're an empire. And then Theocracy is a very interesting build, and that's 1 per 3 levels. So don't count your nation card itself, but that just means total up all of the levels of cards in your deck. So, this is level 1, level 1, level 1, level 4. So that's, 1, 2, 3, 7. And so just total all of that up and divide it by 3. And so Theocracy wants you to have your cards leveled as high as you can get them, basically. But I will also tease that Theocracy has a very interesting build kind of buried in this deck that's hard to get, and it feels very rewarding when it actually pays off. The other crucial thing with scoring is unrest and prosperity. It's actually a simple concept. Some cards, actually many cards, especially as you get into higher levels. Sorry, I keep bumping my camera. That's got to be annoying. Apologize for that. Have unrest and prosperity icons. These are on the bottom left area of where the action is. So level 3 of the Roman legions have 2 of those flame icons. This has 2 unrest. Level 4 of the Roman legions actually has 4 unrest. For every unrest, so first tally up your score, then tally up your unrest, and the default is unrest. For every unrest icon you have in your deck at game end, it's actually -2 victory points from your total score. However, the presence of prosperity icons can cancel out that unrest, or some of it. So for every prosperity icon, which is these leaves here, for every prosperity icon, you get to cancel 1 unrest icon. So let's say, and this won't happen, but by some miracle, this is all the unrest I have in my nation at game end. So I have 4 unrest, and I have 1 prosperity. That's it's called uncovered unrest. So any net unrest over top of prosperity icons. So this prosperity cancels 1 of those. I have a net 3 unrest. That's -2 victory points per. So that's -6 points. So if my point total was 76, I had -6 victory points from unrest. So my net score, my final score, is actually 70. Okay, there's a couple of cards, like Hadrian's Wall gives you a variable amount of unrest, and you'll see what the card action or card effect says. Hadrian's Wall gives you a variable amount of bonus prosperity. For scoring purposes, count it as if that extra prosperity was in your deck. Okay, what else do I want to make sure that you know? The only other small thing that's important to know about actions is some of these cards, you'll be able to get this intuitively from the deck, I'm confident, but some of these cards have effects that allow you to basically interrupt other actions. So normally you resolve the entire action and then it's done. Notable exception here is in Polytheism. It says ignore the discard or degrade costs of a played card and then draw 1 card. So if I would play, let's say this card, City of Rome, part of the cost here, or the cost, is discard a card. Well, I could play this card and interrupt that action and ignore the discard or degrade costs. So I'm ignoring that, but it kind of ends up being the same thing because I'm going to discard that card to play it. Fully resolve this card first, so I would discard that and draw the top card of the deck, and then I would finish resolving this. Now there's only one or two of those in the game, so I wouldn't get too hung up about it, but Polytheism is nice to pair with like degrade costs. Okay, now you know how to play Score Chaser mode. I really do suggest trying to end on each one of those 4 different nation statuses and see what your scoring potential is, and figuring out what the best scoring configurations are, and then go ahead and introduce your rival civs. So there's 4 of them. You have the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Carthaginians, and the Celts. These aren't too bad. This is just so after you figure out your score, keep that score in mind or write it down on your phone is what I do. Then calculate your rival civ's score. Remember, you picked which one you were going to play against at the beginning of the game. Up here, you have their base victory points. So their base points are 62 for the Egyptians. Then each of these starred, these are just bullet points here, is a different conditional scoring rule, and all of these rival civs play differently. So for the Egyptians, for example, the conditions are always based on what's in your own deck at the game end. Your rival civ doesn't have a deck, but they are queuing off of what's in your deck. And so let's look at the Egyptians here. If you have 11 or more region wealth in your deck, the Egyptians score +2 per card in your deck that doesn't have a blue banner. Or the opposite of that, if you have 10 or less wealth in your deck, and nobody please call me out on my algebra here. I'm sure this is wrong. I don't know how this is wrong, but the way I intend this to read is take 10 minus the number of ship icons in your deck, and then take that value times 6. So let's say you have 5 ship icons, so 10 minus 5 is 5. 6 times 5 is 30. So you would add 62 plus 30, and then you would make sure there wasn't any more that you had to do here. So if you were a theocracy, kind of hard to see through my phone, a republic or a monarchy, so everything but empire, you have to also abide this scoring rule, or they get points based on this scoring rule. So take 20 minus n, where n is the number of materials in your deck on the top left of your cards. So some of these have, like I said, higher numbers of those available resources at higher levels, and then you take that value times 2. So you take their base points plus any conditional scoring that they get, and that's their total score. Let's go through a couple others. The Greeks are 61 points plus, and they really only care what nation status you are. So if you are a theocracy, they score points equal to 19 minus the number of bag icons you have times 5. If you're an empire, they score equal to 12 minus the number of culture icons. So you should probably have a plan going into this. And then if you are an ancient status or a condition, they score +6 points per region in your deck. The Celts gain points based on how much unrest you have, how many plant icons you have, and then conditional. So maybe it's important, this could be confusing. So if you're an empire, you can see right there, they get +2 points per level 3 or higher card. And then theocracy is similar. All right, and then the Carthaginians, they really pick on you if you don't have controlled territory at the end of the game. So they take 15 minus the total controlled territory wealth times 3. And then they score based on if you meet the threshold of either 11 or more sword icons or 10 or fewer sword icons. Then they key off of how much prosperity you have. And always remember, add their base points and then the conditional. Phew. I apologize that took so long, but I know I got to everything. Yeah, if you have any questions, there will be a rule book out there, and feel free to comment with any questions or comments. Thank you for watching.